There are times when we wish those who have done wrong in the past will get a chance at a redemption. But every story needs a villain, and fate may twist to make that happen. This week on Schedule for Launch, join me, Zach Walsh, as I speak with Tommaso and Nick of the World Anvil about the upcoming tabletop role-playing game, Broken Tales. In this dark fantasy, you take on the role of those fairy tale villains taking control of their fate and righting their own wrongs. We talk about system, fairy tale rewrites, and developing community. Welcome to Schedule for Launch, a podcast to discover the projects that you may have missed. This week, I am joined by two incredible creators and some people that I've had some nice conversation with already, talking about a new upcoming game that is really cool, really exciting. But Tommaso, Phoenix, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast this week.
Thank you for having us.
Hi, yeah, it's great to be here.
This is one of those games that I've heard a lot about through stream, through Fool's Moon. Specifically from you, Phoenix, you've actually told me a lot about this game, and I'm really excited to explore some of its themes and its tones. But before we get started talking about Broken Tales, could you please tell the audience about yourselves and how you're involved with this project and maybe with World Anvil?
Maybe I can start. So my name is Tommaso De Benetti. As the name suggests, I'm Italian. I don't live in Italy. I live in Finland. I've been here for 15 years now. I always had a huge passion for RPGs. I started when I was 9. Actually, I started playing HeroQuest, and then after a few days of HeroQuest, a friend told me, "Hey, if you like this, you're gonna love this." And then he took me in a abandoned house, and he was showing me D&D. So I started with D&D like the red box. So this is a bit of if you're familiar with Stranger Things, I kind of, my beginnings were a bit like they are depicted in the show. Over the years, I've been moving away from D&D. I tried a lot of systems, Warhammer, Vampire, a lot of World of Darkness in general. Became a part of a gaming club in Italy, and through the gaming club, it was easy to try different things. So I didn't get stuck on D&D, and after trying a lot of other systems and settings, I kind of found out that I preferred other things and other experiences. I do have several editions of D&D. I even have the 5th edition with me, but I have to say I find it so boring that it's one of the few games that I haven't really finished reading. There's no, honestly, I'm happy that it had some kind of resurgence, because it allowed a lot of people to try the hobby. I'm just a bit surprised that so many are drawn to it, because it's not a very easy system to start with. There's a lot to read, and it's really kind of boring. but it's okay. It's okay. I mean, whatever works, and from there, some of them in the end they try other things, and there's so many games out there that are very exciting. For me, it's always been horror has been my main draw. I play a lot of things, but horror has been my main passion. So as I was saying, I've been playing a lot of World of Darkness. I've been playing a lot of Cult and other systems. And after many years being abroad, and I didn't have my gaming group. For some years, it wasn't that easy to be in touch with your friends, because there weren't these instant messengers that you have now, WhatsApp or Discord. So I didn't have a gaming group, and I started to be nostalgic, and I suggested to a friend, "Hey, maybe we should try to write an RPG together." And then we started that way. We started with a sci-fi setting that isn't translated into English, even though there is an English reduction of it in another game. The setting is called Nostalgia, La Flotta Nomade in Italian, and you can find a shorter, condensed version of the setting within the game of a friend, not the end. It was on Kickstarter last year in English. It's a kind of a generic system, but the book also features several settings, and one of them it's this reduced version of our original setting. Like the original version is 350 pages. We made this is short version into 20. So you can imagine that there's been some cuts here. Some cuts here and there. Yeah. But basically, we started it more of as a hobby, and we became a real company in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And Broken Tales is our first game in English. We published several titles in Italian before Broken Tales. And the plan is that from now on, pretty much everything we do would also be available in English. Maybe other languages, but no promises there.
That's rad.
It is.
That's so exciting. You mentioned horror being something that you're really into. I think that late June through August has been my unofficial let's talk about horror games, because I don't know if we've had a non-horror theme thing on the show for about 6 weeks now.
You're meeting a lot of creepy people.
I love it. So I've talked about this a lot, but I'm doing a horror writing class right now, and I'm really into horror podcasts, and it's just like
it's very fun,
Stars have aligned, and I get to talk about scary stuff.
My first big passion as like books that I actually enjoyed reading was Stephen King. So I think that had a huge impact on my preferences. Yeah. And I think thus far I've been reading maybe half of the stuff he wrote, because I think he's his total bibliography is around 80 books or something like that. I think I read maybe 40. Yeah.
Wow.
So I still have a bit to read. The guy, it's very prolific, even a bit too much maybe. But
yeah, I don't know how to follow that. I never started in an abandoned house to play TTRPGs, but I don't know. That's a hard act to follow. But hey, everyone who's listening, my name is Nick Cruz. I am the community manager for the World Anvil Publishing's Discord channel. I'm also known online mostly as Phoenix Writes or Phoenix Writes TV if you watch Twitch. Yeah, I am the community manager for the World Anvil Publishing. Mostly got into the company because of Broken Tales. Someone, a very bad influence on me who is a friend, told me about Broken Tales. And I was like, oh, I missed the Kickstarter. And they were like, I got you, fam. Here is the late pledge. I said, okay, fine. I'm going to join this. And I haven't been playing that long, TTRPG wise, because where I live, which is an island nation in Southeast Asia that we will not disclose for purposes, we don't have a big community of role-play gamers. It's mostly like close-knit groups. So when I discovered tabletop role-playing game, I discovered it from friends outside of my country. And then I was like, oh, this is interesting. And I started talking with some of my friends, and we never were able to organize play until around 2020 during the pandemic lockdowns. Yeah. Pandemic times. And it started from there. But like I wasn't that enthusiastic about D&D after I've played it a couple times. What really got me going for tabletop RPGs was Call of Cthulhu.
Really?
Yeah, I played several, like a 2-shot or a 3-shot of a Call of Cthulhu game set in the 1950s, I believe.
Okay.
And the horror aspect of it, the fact that it's a bit realistic, if you're faced with this kind of horror, there's no way that you're mostly gonna survive it. Like, there's trauma that's happening. It wasn't a full TPK. We didn't die. One of us did, but we don't talk about that one. We didn't die per se, but it the horror aspect of it just hooked me in. I was like, okay, I like the horror genre from books, not so much in video games, but now I see I like it in tabletop role playing too. I was like, okay, let's do this. And then I stumbled upon Broken Tales, and I was like, this feels like fate. So yeah, I was like, I started out just a member, honestly, and then I offered Tommaso to help him with promotions, and he was like, okay, let's see. And then we got our first live stream of the game before it was. Remind me, it was going to be launching that day, that time, right? Like after, I don't remember, but
Uh,
it was a
I have no
promotion.
memory, but I'm an old man, so it's normal that I don't remember exactly what happened. But to latch to something that Nix is saying, I think one big goal for Broken Tales was something not strictly related to the game. We wanted to create an international community for our games because I know that there's a lot of potential, and we also try to have games that thematically you can look at them and you know that they're made by us in a way that they kind of fit together. Which is a pro and it's also a con in some ways. But so our one goal was to create this international community, and I was very surprised when Broken Tales did so well, because we expected it to do about half as well as it did. And the biggest chunk of the backers are from abroad. When I say abroad, I mean not Italians, not from the Italian market, which is the one where we spent the last few years developing games from. It is a very vital market, but it's also very small, and it's always more or less the same people buying stuff. When you go to an event, it's always the same author, so everybody knows everybody else. So you need to keep a good relationship with everybody. But so we managed to create, I think, a good community. We have a great Discord server. Some people are more shy than others, so some take more part to the day-to-day activities. But overall, I was very surprised by how well it was received outside the national borders where it was conceived, And of course, like Nick said, they were not the only one joining our team, so to say, and as volunteers, and maybe as soon as it's possible, maybe as full members of our team. Because we found a lot of people willing to help us develop the games and the IPs and the infrastructure to not only promote the games but also support them. For example, we opened a Reddit page for Broken Tales where people can submit their own creations, and if you go there now, there's already quite a lot of stuff that is basically playable.
We got a lot of very creative people there.
yeah, absolutely.
I've seen that.
Top-notch creators on our server, so please join.
So we've kind of been dancing around it, though, but what is Broken Tales?
I think Nix might want to take this one. We've been working on a podcast pitch, and they made a suggestion, so let's test it out.
All right. So let's see this. So Broken Tales RPG is a dark fantasy RPG set in a fictional 18th century Europe that mixes reality and fantasy, as the line between what's real and make-believe is permanently blurred, or maybe it gets erased when the realm of fairy tales gets shattered by the corrupted wish of an innocent child. Basically, it spills the world of fairy tales onto the human world.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens now is, in Broken Tales, you are a former fairy tale villain who finds themselves thrust in a world where you are given this chance at redeeming yourself by joining a group called the Order of Hunters. So, what you do in the Order of Hunters is you go on missions and do your share of heroics as you fight against familiar faces who used to be the lauded heroes of a life that you barely recall now, the longer you stay in this world. Basically, you used to be a bad guy, now you're not. You have a totally different backstory. You don't know what's going on, but there's still bits of darkness in you.
So the main concept, if I can interject, the main concept here is that the classic fairy tales have been shattered, and they've been shattered for some plot reason. There's been this child that was granted a wish. He made the wish, but it was somebody was whispering in his ear. They made a wrong choice. The request seemed innocent enough. The child wanted the villains to become good, finally. But because every light needs a shadow, when the villains became good, they were rebuilt as good characters. All the classic good characters of the fairy tales were twisted in some way. Not all of them became evil, but all of them were twisted. And the consequence of that was that the fairy tales we know and we remember from Disney movies, from the Brother Grimm's, from whatever, that in Broken Tales, they keep a similar framework, but they are not the stories you remember. They have changed, something else happened, and each one of them is basically an investigation that these hunters, which are controlled by the papacy, I think this part was omitted by the pitch, but the Pope in person is controlling the hunters, keeping this magical creature under the wing of the Church of Rome.
Yeah, you're basically working for the Pope. That's the thing that I missed.
Every scenario is an investigation where the hunters are sent to find out what these broken tales have caused in that specific area. It's like a bit X-Files. It's a bit Suicide Squad. It's Suicide Squad with fairy tales. I think somebody came up with that definition. I find it very fitting.
Yeah, Suicide Squad of fairy tales. It fits. I know, as a person who's been running these games, there's some very interesting backstories that have been changed for the hunters that you're gonna find out if you get a copy of the game.
Yes. Oh my gosh. The character backstories are so good. That was one of the first things I did when I was flipping through this and trying to find questions to ask. Was I scrolled right down to the bottom. First of all, art style, perfect for the tone of this. It is so eerie and creepy, and specifically I really like the imagery for the big bad wolf because that thing is so scary. But just reading those backstories and like how they have been shaped and retwisted, Bluebeard comes to mind. That one's incredible.
Yeah, actually, now that you mentioned that, I need to specify I'm not the main author of the game. I'm the creative director. In a way, I control the project. So
yeah.
I know every aspect of it, but the main author is a very talented Italian RPG author. It's called Alberto Tronchi. He has many games under his belt. And he is usually paired with this artist, Daniel Comerci, which is also an author, but his main thing is a graphic design and illustration. And you will find his illustrations nowadays in many games, including Cult, Shadowrun. He is featured in all the Lordsmith material, recent Lordsmith material. So you will find it in many places. But they form this kind of creative team called Black Box Games, and we've been working with them since the beginning. And this is a collaboration between the Word Anvil Publishing, which is me and my business partner Luca, and them as a creative force behind the project. We take all decisions together, so we're all very involved with it. But I want to point it out that they are the main respectively writer and illustrator of the game, even though you can find some of my writing in the game. In the second book, the Broken Ones, there's a scenario based on the Happy Prince that I really strongly wanted to write. So I pleaded with Alberto until he let me write it. But
yeah, they are such a creative team, and the way that, and like that's something I really want to stress too, is that like this is definitely not the smallest team we've had on. It's not a big team either, though, and the quality of the book is so high for the size of the team. So, like, first of all, kudos to that. I was going to get there in a moment, but just your options for character backstories and like designing characters. Like, if you're making up your own, like, there's a ton of pre-made characters for you to use if you want to. But character creation is incredible in this game. So I was wondering if
if you want, I can elaborate a bit on that.
Let's do that.
I can tell you what was the reasoning there. We wanted the game that people can just pitch to their friends at the table, maybe between a 6 months campaign of D&D and the next. And it's like, hey guys, do you want to take a break? Because this is a game about fairy tales, and they can give you the pitch that Nick was giving you before. And the good thing about it is that because fairy tales have such iconic characters, we took most of the famous ones and broke them down for you and rebuilt them so they are these new characters that you can use. And for each one of them, there is a great illustration. And on the other side of the sheet, you find all the information you need to play. So the idea was that you could just, as a GM, as a storyteller, as we call it, you can just spread these great illustrations in front of your friends and say, "Hey, which one you want to play?" And then if your friends recognize a character that they want to play, we have very popular characters like I don't know, Baba Yaga. We have Bluebird. We have the Big Bad Wolf. We have our version of Hook. Yeah. We have our version of the Sea Witch, which is probably most of the people know her as Ursula from the Little Mermaid. So if you want to play any of these characters, we have it. We have you covered. But then if you don't like how we made them, because they've been sometimes changed significantly, if you don't like how we made them, or you want to use a character that is not included in the game, we have this procedure to break an iconic character and make your own, starting from the background story and then creating all the things you need to play, descriptor, gifts, so we can cover them later. The problem with that is that it's a kind of a longish procedure, because it's not trivial to take a character, find out what's important about him or her, and then decide what to flip. It's a longish design process. So it's a bit of a secondary mode for the game. If you want to play fast, you can use one of the existing characters. If you want to make your own, you can make it. But usually in most games, creating your own character is the main thing. Here is that you can do it. It's going to take some time. And usually it takes you to know a bit how the game goes before you try that. So of course you can do it, but it's not recommended maybe for a first time you play, because it's a bit more challenging than average role play game to do that. And that's why we are offering so many characters. They are like, let me count, I think they are 14 in the base game, and then we have another 13 in the expansion.
And those are your really popular ones, the ones that everybody knows. But I think where this game is really strong when it comes to its character creation is that it allows you to kind of express yourself as a writer just as much as a role-play game player, because this game it's not like dice heavy. You're not going to be running in like a Pathfinder character and stacking up your character and making yourself this insanely powerful monster, even though you can play as some insanely powerful monsters. but it really focuses more on the narrative elements and the mystery instead of getting in and crushing everybody in your path.
Yeah, that's correct. Like power play is not exactly the point of the game, even though I must point out that the characters themselves are already very powerful in general, because most of them are magical creatures, or they have some special ability, because they used to be the villains from fairy tales. So, for example, you have Baba Yaga, which can use magic, and you don't have a list of enchantments or spells like you could have on a classic fantasy game that we won't mention. You just come up with what you want to do and describe it, and according to your description you have to pay some costs. But pretty much, like, we have a character called the Immortal. He just cannot die. So this presents novel challenges to the storyteller, because maybe in other games you're not used to characters that can fly or they don't die. Of course, when I say it doesn't die, it doesn't mean that he cannot be hurt, or he cannot be hindered, or maybe he cannot create a lot of troubles for himself. There are various sources of fun in the game that don't necessarily come from power playing through it,
It's just that this game, literally as a hunter, your imagination is your limitation. Because I have experienced people playing Baba Yaga in ways that I didn't expect. Because honestly, whenever I run these games, actually, for promotions and or whatnot, I always tell my players, okay, these are not your regular character sheets. Anything that you can think of that you think your character can do it. Because the only thing that
actually we did have some complaints about that. Like I got some feedback from a guy, Polish guy, running the game at a Polish convention, and he was saying that when he presented the character sheets in front of the players, somebody said that, oh, I never seen a sheet with so few numbers on it, because most of it is not numbers. Most of it is what you make your character do, and how you describe what you do. What Nick says is absolutely true. Like, in a way, this is a game that forces you to describe a lot what you're doing, because according to your description, you cannot say I hit the enemy. You have to say exactly how you hit the enemy, where you hit the enemy, what are you trying to achieve hitting the enemy. Because according to your description, I, as a storyteller, can decide if we even need to do any kind of check or not, or your character is capable enough that they can do it anyway without even doing a check. So for some players coming from more crunchy systems, this might be a bit, they might feel a bit confused in the beginning. But I have seen very little pushback once people understand how this works. And actually, many have told me, okay, I will not go back to how I was playing before, because I can see that I don't need all these numbers now. I don't need all the. Of course, it's a very different way to play, and I believe there's a space for everything. I'm not saying that crunchy is bad, because I would be lying to myself. Like, the first system we published as a company is very crunchy. So I also like numbers. It's just that this is not the game for crunchiness. That's it.
Yeah. I was going to say, if you don't like crunchy, it's a little bit weird, because both of you have been like, oh yeah, Call of Cthulhu. And that's a bit of a crunchy system at times.
When Nick mentioned it, I also had a huge childhood spent on Cthulhu. So that's also part of my horror
repertoire.
How do you say?
Repertoire.
Yeah, exactly.
We're not saying we don't like crunchy. It's just that this game is not crunchy in the way it's of mechanical crunchy. It's crunchy in the way that it's narrate to me what you want to do.
Yes. And that's the term that has been dubbed emergent narration, which means basically that the hunters are the ones who are saying what they're doing, where they're going, how they're doing it, and the narrator or storyteller is forming that setting. But it's a conversation. This game is very much a conversation that has some dice checks involved, and those dice checks would be position checks and defense checks. Could maybe one of you talk a little bit about how these position and defense checks work and what exactly they do?
I can try. Before we go there, I just want to mention one thing that came to my mind now that you were speaking. This kind of freedom is also reflected in the way we present the scenarios that are included in the book. Of course, you can create your own scenarios like in any other game, but we have created this structure which is very sandboxy, meaning that we give you an initial situation. Okay, this is what's happening. We give you a bunch of characters, and each of them has this thing called agenda. So the way you know how they move on the chessboard, so to say, is that each of them is trying to achieve something. And as a storyteller, you always know that, okay, is this something this character would do? Like, would this character fight to the death if he's actually trying to become rich? Probably not. Then he wouldn't attack you right now. He would try to flee or things like that. And we have locations, and the main structure of the scenarios is that the characters are thrown into this situation. They know what's happening in the beginning, and then they are free to explore the scenario more or less as they wish. Then for people that prefer a more linear structure, we also have a suggested I don't know if you can say it in English. I'm sorry. Suggested order of the scenes. Yeah, we call it the scene tree. So that if you don't know what to do, you can kind of guide your players a bit in this direction or in that direction, and you know that you will get to the end. Because if you're not a very expert storyteller, or if your players actually want to be told what to do, then you might prefer that structure. But in general, we found that it's very liberating to have this kind of sandboxy structure, because when you play that way, it's really hard that you play the same scenario in the same way twice. I've been playing some scenarios many times, and very often they go in completely different directions when you leave more freedom to the players to go to talk to this character, go here now, instead of telling them what to do at each moment. Then, of course, this again is a different kind of style of play, so it might not be for everybody. Okay, so I'll try to explain how the system works very briefly. I think that the first thing we need to do is maybe look at the character sheet, so we can understand what's behind one of these characters, behind the illustration. Let me find something. I wanted to go with Bluebeard. Because it was now, of course, it's the only one I can't find. Okay, here.
Bluebeard is such an interesting character.
I love him in Broken Tales.
I know,
basically, the idea is that you have the name of the character, you have a little background story. In our version of Broken Tales is this French aristocrat that has had many wives, like in the original story, but all of them have been killed by his enemies, so he wasn't responsible for their death. And this kind of separates this Bluebeard from the one, for example, from Bluebeard's Bride, if you're familiar with that game, which is an awesome game. I really like it. But this is a different character. So Bluebeard here is some kind. It's expert in solving puzzles and problems. But deep inside, there is this thing that I need to mention. Each character has 3 gifts, and these are the special abilities. One of them is called the Dark Ego. The Dark Ego is that special ability that reflects what the character was originally. So in our case, originally in the story, Bluebeard was an assassin, a murderer. So even in Broken Tales, he maintains that feature, but it's called the Dark Ego because it's his most powerful skill, and it's the one that can be unlocked only when the condition on his activator is fulfilled. And in this case, the activator for that skill for him would be when you are revealing your dark side or acting aggressively, despite your outwardly calm and staid appearance. For example, if you threaten someone, then at that point you have fulfilled the activation of your dark ego, and that allows you to become again a violent man, like in the original story. But other than that, he is technically a different person, or at least he's trying to be. So as I was saying, there are 3 gifts, which are these special skills. For each of these gifts, we also have one thing called descriptor. A descriptor is a sentence, the descriptive sentence that tells something the character is good at and something the character is bad at. So, for example, the first one of Bluebeard is my specialty is problem solving, and I have a talent for analyzing every situation, allowing me to find resources and discover clues. Then the negative part of this is managing danger requires calm and concentration, and so I hate acting precipitously. Precipitously. This is a difficult word for me to pronounce, but you got it, I think. So why the descriptor is important? Because it tells us what is easy and what is difficult for Bluebird to do. If I, as a storyteller, think that your descriptor is covering the current situation, then most likely you don't need even to do any kind of check. If I think that the outcome of that check is uncertain, then we might have to do this position check. We call it position check because it will, if it goes to, if the outcome is positive, it will position you in the scene in a different position than where you were before. So in this game, there's no check that can happen that leaves you exactly in the situation you were before. Like in some games, if you try to, I don't know, like break down a door and it doesn't happen the first time, you can try for 1,000 times until you manage to do it. In this game, every time you do something, there is a change in the situation. You can bring into the game the negative part of your descriptor to gain experience. So if you create troubles for yourself, you make the situation more difficult for yourself, then you can mark this descriptor, and at the end of certain periods, you can spend you can translate this into XPs and spend the XPs to make your character better or do other things. Okay, so now that I cover a bit the descriptors and gifts, I hope in a way that is at least understandable. The way these position checks work is that the storyteller will give you an opposition level. It's a difficulty level, okay? We have 3 standard ones. The easy is 3, then we have the medium is 5, and then there's the hard, which is 7. So you need to at least reach that level, that amount of successes to pass the position check. If your descriptor is helpful in the situation, you start with 3 base successes. If you have nothing that is applicable, then you start only from 1. And then the rest of the mechanic is that you need to decide how to fill the gap between the number of successes you have from the descriptors and the opposition level. So for example, if you have an opposition level of 5 and one of your descriptors can help, then you start from 3 and you have a gap of 2 to fill. The ways you can fill this gap is you have 2 ways. You can roll dice, and you can roll as many dice as you want, and I will explain that in a moment, why you would want to roll more. But even a single one on a die makes the whole action fail. Okay, so when you use the dice, you introduce the possibility for an action to fail. The other way you can fill that gap is using this finite resource, which is called Soma. and every character has a certain amount, and they can regenerate it under certain conditions, but it's hard to come by, so you need to be very careful how you use it, because every point of this soma you spend is an automatic success. So it allows you to fill one gap point, so to say. However, the soma is also used to activate some of the gifts, so you need to be a bit careful how you use it. The cool thing is that you can mix these two things. So you can decide, okay, I need to fill 2 gap points. I will roll 1 die and spend 1 soma. Now, the other important thing in this game is that this is very different from other systems. The player has to tell in the beginning to what kind of outcome they're aiming at, because there are 3 kind of outcomes in this game. So if you just reach the opposition level, exactly the same number of successes as the opposition level, you obtain an outcome with a cost. That means that yes, the action succeeds as you described it, but also the storyteller can introduce something bad that happens to you, like you can lose an object, you can get a wound, maybe I don't know, the key you have in your hand breaks or something like that. If you overcome the opposition level by 1 point, then you have a standard outcome, and the standard outcome means that the action happens exactly as you explained it. And then if you overcome the opposition level by 2 points, you not only succeed in your action, but also you get an increment. An increment means that something positive happens, and you can negotiate that with the storyteller. And some increments, some gifts also have special increments. If you have an increment to spend, you can activate some sub-special power. Okay. So that's the idea. And the reason why you might want to roll more dice sometimes is because you're trying to obtain, for example, an outcome with an increment. So you are risking more, rolling more dice that can introduce the possibility for a failure, but you're aiming for the higher outcome. And this is a bit confusing for some players in the beginning, because in most games you first roll the die and then they tell you what happens. But here you decide beforehand what you are trying to achieve and to which degree of success, right? So that's pretty much the overview. I don't know if I've been clear enough, or if you have questions.
No, that makes sense. Your successes deal with parts of your character sheet and descriptors that help build out what you're aiming for.
Yeah, exactly. One other interesting aspect is that we don't have HP here. We have wounds, and each character in general can take only up to 3 wounds. And the wounds here are they are technically descriptors. So when you're wounded, you just don't lose 1 wound. You need to write down, okay, I have a slash across my arm. And the reason why you have to write that down is because it has narrative impact. So if you are wounded and you're losing blood, it means that if you're trying to flee, people will be able to follow your blood trail. If your knee is broken, there's no way you can escape, or you can climb a tree or something like that. And also it gives an indication to the storyteller how long it would take for that specific kind of wound to be healed organically or through magic or whatever it is. So everything you do here is very descriptive, because according to how the description is, this is something I haven't said, that opposition level can also be lowered or raised. Enemies also have descriptors, and according to their descriptors, the standard opposition level might be raised or lowered. If you're trying to hide and there is a dog that is looking for you, and his descriptor says, I have a very keen sense of smell, and I don't know, maybe you've been in the you're covered in filth, let's say, then probably that position check is going to be harder than normal for you in that specific situation, because the dog is specialized in that specific action and you are at a disadvantage now because you're covered in filth. And with this, I think we cover 95% of the system.
So actually that system running and reception was something that I actually wanted to talk to Nick about. Nick, you've run this game a lot on stream. Can you tell me a little bit about player feedback, what you've learned about the game, and just your experience with it?
Most of the time, since this is it's a very theater of the mind game. You actually don't need maps or any visual aids to play it. What happens here is that you need clear communication between the players and the storyteller. Because if the players don't ask the storyteller specifically, if they don't say, okay, I'm gonna go into this area. Okay, now the storyteller has to ask, okay, are you looking for something specifically, or are you just walking through? Let's say they're walking to a graveyard. Are you gonna be looking for anything, or are you just walking through? That's where you start positioning your characters in the theater of the mind setup. Most of the time, my players are very receptive about being very detailed about how they move around in the map or how they move around in the setting. Sometimes when it comes to new players, of course, you will always have that person who's not yet used to narrating everything that they do. So I never had, honestly, I've never had difficulty having someone narrate their actions, especially when it comes to this game. After the first 30 minutes of playing, maybe even less, you'd start to see a flow of how the characters interact with each other, even as they move about in their own mindscape. You'll have someone who's gonna be like, "Oh, I would like to dig up this what looks like freshly turned earth and see what I get." And then another player would be like, "Okay, I'm gonna watch this person, maybe step away. I don't want the dirt to ruin my dress." Something like that. It creates a very interesting interaction between the players. A lot more than what I normally see in TTRPGs.
And I think that comes with the freedom of flow for these kinds of games. Like, I think we've made it pretty clear that this game isn't D&D. Obviously, we don't hate it. It's just not this. This is something very, very different. I would hope that you don't hate D&D. You are playing it in like half an hour.
I don't hate D.
No, as I mentioned, I have several D&D books on my shelves.
Yeah. This is just something very different.
Nowadays, I try to play something else. That's the thing.
Something narrative. Yeah, this is about telling a story. I think that's at the heart of what this game
You know what? It's also the amount of preps that usually D&D requires that it doesn't fit my adult life anymore.
Totally fair. We're actually starting to run real short on time, but I have 2 questions. One's a little bit bigger than the other that I ask at the end of every single episode. And this can be as far as like running a game or creating like a world or a story. But what advice can you give to new designers looking to make something, but they're not sure where to begin?
I can tell you the sad truth is that it requires so much work and so much perseverance. I've been at this since 2015. It took us 7 years actually 6 years to do our first international campaign. It's been an enormous financial black hole for many of those years. Many of those years, like I personally invested so much money that I shouldn't even. I do keep track of it, but it's honestly embarrassing.
That's tough.
Yeah, and even when financially something does well, like Broken Tales did, there can always be some unexpected events. For example, we didn't forecast the war between Russia and Ukraine and all the consequences of it, which are very heavy on everybody who's making games nowadays. You can ask anyone. Basically, you can go on any Kickstarter update at the moment. Everybody is gonna tell more or less the same things. The price of paper went up, the price of energy went up, and people might wonder, okay, why do I care about the price of energy? You need to send me a game. But it turns out that printing press used a lot of energy. The transportation shipping has been crazy. I think there's been recently a case with the Cyberpunk board game from Come On. People were outraged by the shipping expenses, but the truth is that shipping went like double or tripled. So, I mean, something gotta give, So, from the point of view of an entrepreneur, this is very hard business. When it comes to you showing something to somebody, I can tell you my experience when people contact me. It's like, hey, I have a game, I want to show it to you, and then they send me 300 pages of stuff to read. The truth is that I don't have any time to read things that we don't make internally, because we already have like 10 projects in the queue internally. So if you send me 300 pages, there's no way I can read it. One good way to pitch your project is that you make a very abridged pitch, like a couple of pages. We don't, no, not even the quick start, like just a couple of pages. What is your project about? Why should I care? Show me how do you envision this thing to look. So maybe you can invest in 1-2 pictures that actually give me an idea of what you have in your mind. That is much more likely for me to catch my attention. The other thing is that most of the games I've been interested in as a publisher to pick up, in the end, we didn't pick up any because, as I mentioned, we have so many internal projects. But most of the projects I would have picked up if there would have been the opportunity are projects that I found out maybe on Patreon. Somebody was kind of discussing them and releasing material on Patreon, or people that have been very active in the community, and bit by bit, they show some kind of commitment to what they're doing. They show some kind of progress, and then bit by bit, I learn about the game until the point where I think, hey, this is actually kind of interesting. Why don't we turn this into a real game? That kind of thing. It's I always meant to do some kind of course about how to pitch things to publishers, because I think 99% of people do it wrong. And we have now this initiative that we launched earlier in the year called TWA Academy, where we actually have courses, and the first courses are about crowdfunding, and there's one about like how do you keep a group of people together, a creative group of people together, because that's another problem. Like, people start and then they get bored after 3 months because they find out it's too much work. So I share my experiences there, and they've been useful for some other people. One thing I always wanted to do is like, how do you pitch a game to someone who doesn't know you, doesn't care about your game yet? Because as I mentioned, most of the people do it wrong, and then there's no chance for their game to be picked up. And also, and then I wrap it up, you can go the other way and do it yourself, which is what I did in the end, because I thought it was easier to do it myself, because I thought, okay, maybe I can do this. It's not impossible, it's hard, and it's challenging, and it requires a lot of commitment, but you can go the self-publishing way and do it well, especially if you have a solid plan. That is important. Yes. Then Nick, I don't know if you want to add something.
Actually, I think you've covered all of it. Most of my take is that if you want to try games that are not, if you want to broaden your horizon in games, try games that you've never heard before. Look up these profiles of games that you might not, at first sight, like you might not try in normally. These games might surprise you.
Yep.
Yeah, I think this is very good advice. One thing I found out after I published the first book, which was this generic system called the Monad system, which is the
basis, right?
Progenitor of the system we have in Broken Tales now, which is called Monad Echo. I found out that it was my ideal game. I put together all the ideas that I had for a game. It maybe was a bit too much. That's why I was saying earlier that it was quite crunchy. But some ideas were pretty good, and we brought them to Monad Echo in a simplified form, a streamlined form. But one thing I learned is that in the gap that I had when I moved abroad and I didn't play as often as I used when I was a teenager, game design for role-play games has evolved so much. And I think it took me maybe 10 of the last 15 years to catch up with all the cool stuff that came out and new ways of thinking about problems. And it was a really useful exercise to find out what's out in the market. And you might think your idea is great until you find out that 10 other people did it better. So it's very important that you are aware of what's out there before you pitch a game that made sense in the 90s but doesn't make much sense now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a really solid piece of advice too. Tommaso, Phoenix, where can people find out more about you? And obviously Broken Tales.
Yeah, if you want to know more about Broken Tales, I would suggest the website is thewordanvil.com. Remember the article, The Word Anvil, because there is also a wordanvil.com, which is a word building platform, and it's not us. So if you go on thewordanvil.com, you will find all the links for pre-orders to Broken Tales. We're going to have, by the time this episode is out, I think the PDFs are going to be available. There's going to be a link to our Discord community. We have hundreds of people there now. And I love when new people join because I want to grow it. And then there are all the social media links. Personally, if you want to follow me, you can find me on Twitter at tdebenetti, which it's probably hard to spell, but I don't know, maybe in the description of the episode we can...
It'll be there.
Write it down, yeah.
All right. Well, for me, you can mostly find me lurking in the Discord channel of the World Anvil because, of course, doing my moderating job, trying not to let the community implode on itself, or contributing to the implosion anyway.
No,
And
there's
other
very
than
little
that-
drama. Let's not undersell it. I think there's very little drama in our community.
Yeah. Other than that, you can also find me mostly on Twitter, where I post all of my streamed game schedules, or I retweet some of the promotions from channels that I play on. On Twitter, it's gonna be Phoenix Writes with 2 S's. And then on Twitch, I also have a personal Twitch account, which is Phoenix Writes TV, because someone has Phoenix Writes on Twitch. So, yeah.
I don't know how you have time for your own Twitch channel. Like
It's-
you don't sleep, Phoenix. Let's be honest.
Yeah, let's be honest. I don't sleep. I don't know what sleep is.
Yeah,
Really.
Nick and I met through Shadowrun and Fool's Moon Entertainment, and yeah, that's been a lot of fun. So, as always, audience, those links are going to be down in the description down below. Go check out Broken Tales. Like, go watch some of the actual plays for it. Join the Discord. It's really cool. I really like this game. And thank you both so much for joining me this week. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, audience, for listening. Tommaso, Phoenix, and Broken Tales, they're scheduled to launch really soon, so go check it out, pick it up. But until then, take care of yourselves. Have a good night. We'll see you on the next one. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much to Tommaso and Nick for coming onto the show this week. This one was pre-recorded like a really long time back, but with Halloween coming up and the spooky season being right at our doorstep, Now might be an excellent time for you to hop in and try this amazing dark fantasy role-playing game. PDFs are available on the World Anvil's website, and I highly recommend checking it out. And thank you as always for listening, audience. And thanks for indulging in last week's episode for a trial listen of Terminal Moraine. I got a lot of amazing feedback on it, and we'll make some adjustments in the coming weeks. Hopefully it'll be available by the end of the year as an actual show. If you like either show, though, and want to hear more, let a friend know, as I don't spend any money to advertise the podcast. I'm also starting to run out of people to have on the show. So if you or someone you know is working on an indie project and wants to come on and talk about it, hit me up. Let me know. Let's have a conversation. That's all for this week, though. So take care of yourselves, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.